Okay, so we're back. Did you guys go get your moss? Did you pick up a piece of it or at least take some pictures? I'd encourage you, go out and explore this stuff. So pick it up gently, pull it apart a little bit, take a look at those rhizoids that are anchoring it to whatever substrate it was on, whether it's the tree or the rocks in your yard or whatever. But look at this stuff. These guys are pretty darn abundant. We find mosses across a lot of different ecosystems. Actually, let me get a text box in here. Some things to just remember about mosses. We find them across a wide range of habitats, but they still need water for reproduction. I mean, water for life, like everything else, but significantly or specifically for reproduction, to wash that sperm over to the egg. That's really, really tough because they're not using wind, they're not using an animal to move it. They need water, and the sperm are going to be flagellated so they can kind of swim over there and make their way over to the egg. Other things to note about mosses. They are sensitive to air pollution, so we tend not to see as much diversity in environments where there is air quality issues. Not an absolute, but you'll see patterns like more polluted urban environments tend to have less moss diversity and less moss abundance. They will often, we consider them soil conditioners, meaning they actually help form soil. So they break stuff down, they break nutrients down, and can actually create soil and produce a more hospitable environment for lots of other plants to move into. Okay, so that's the big idea behind the mosses. Now, the third group to mention here within the overarching category of the bryophytes is the group called the hornworts. We know these guys as phylum Anthocertophyta. Weird group. Evolutionary origin is not clear yet. Fossil evidence, it indicates that these guys were first around somewhere between 145 to about 65 million years ago. I'm just going to put question marks there because there's a bunch of uncertainty here. You know, their origins, what they evolved from, still not truly understood. All right, so the evolutionary origins are uncertain. All right, so here's a goofy thing about them. The sporophyte is not 100% dependent upon the gametophyte. Okay, and I want to jump back to our previous two groups and point something out. Oh, look, there's your sporophyte attached to the gametophyte. This is dependent upon the gametophyte for survival for everything. When we go back to the liverworts, same thing. We get the sporophyte dependent upon the thallus here, this gametophyte. So if the gametophyte has a problem, both those sporophytes are done for. But in the case of the hornworts, the sporophyte is not 100% dependent. The sporophyte is actually, I'm going to circle it in red, slightly photosynthetic. not completely 100% photosynthetic where it can function completely on its own, but it's not nearly as dependent as what we see with the other two groups. Yeah, that's kind of the weird thing with them. And one other neat feature is that hornworts have stomata for gas exchange. Remember liverworts? Come on back up here. They have air chambers, just little chambers or pockets for gas exchange. Hornworts actually have a stomata. That's also found in those other plants, kind of the higher plants that have stomata for gas exchange. So we see kind of an evolutionary shift here to become a little more complex, structurally a little bit more advanced than what we see in the other two groups that we just talked about that fall under that big overarching bryophyte category. But this kind of jelly-like green thing here, that is the Hornwork Amidophyte. It's got a similar life cycle that we saw in the mosses and the liverworts as well. But like I said, just a weird group, not very diverse. All my years of teaching, we've never been able to obtain a sample of these guys to use for labs, for study. Just very limited in diversity within this group. So lots of questions to be asked and hopefully more knowledge to be gained about them to figure out how do they best fit into the plant evolutionary picture. Are they really in the best grouping, or do we need to reclassify them? So as we talked about earlier in the semester with classification, it is constantly a moving target. So, okay, I am going to stop here, shorter lecture on this one, cut it here, and then I am going to start up with the tracheophytes with our next lecture. That way it can kind of chunk this together. This is the bryophyta, well, the introduction to the plants, the land plants, and the bryophyta, done. Then we go into the tracheophytes and look at those are vascular plants that are seedless. How does that group work? So I want to try to compartmentalize it. So let's draw a big line, or I'll put a bunch of X's here. Do orange. So I want you guys to stop this, and then we'll jump into the next group of plants with the next kind of series of lecture parts. Okay, so signing out.